Well, I feel like I'm definitely back in school. I was tardy a bit earlier, so I apologize for that. Don't know if I'm going to get demerits or whatnot, but it's just like when I was in school so many years ago. The dancing was brilliant. Thank you very, very much. To the brother who did his poetry and rap as well, thank you. And thank you to the General Union of Palestinian Students as well. You know, I will talk about Palestine, of course, since that's really the focus of this. However, what I don't want to do is continue to repeat what would be obvious to everybody who has their eyes open. I don't know how much we need to talk about the problems before we actually do what we're capable of doing, because to me that's really the issue. Not so much who's committing the crimes and how grievous they are, it's what we're doing or not doing, which I find to be most interesting of all. The way that I see the world that we live in is, I think, a sane way of seeing the world, and that is, it is completely and totally unacceptable. I don't need to be Palestinian, although I am a Palestinian. I'm a naturalized Palestinian. My heart is with Palestine. I will bleed for Palestine. I will die for Palestine if necessary. We don't need to be Palestinians to see that this world is completely and totally unacceptable. And I just don't understand how anyone can accept the unacceptable. And I think it's a matter of having self-respect or not. And I made a decision once I became aware. I wasn't always aware. When I was young, I was quite stupid. I joined the Marine Corps at the age of 19 years old. I believed that my nation was the greatest nation in the world. I thought freedom and democracy and all of this ridiculous stuff that is spoon-fed to the population to the point that most people just believe it and they regurgitate it, thinking that it's true. And that was the circumstances to which I joined the Marine Corps. I was sent off to what they call a war, but I don't really consider any of the things that America's involved in to be wars. I think it's much more accurate to call them slaughters or war crimes. A war implies that there are equal parties on two opposing sides fighting each other with some semblance of a question as to whether one side will win or the other. America simply goes off and slaughters people. That's not war. I also believe that what America is doing, what Britain is doing, what the EU endorses, is nothing more than the modern-day version of empire that's existed from the beginning of so-called civilization. At least in the old days, empire was more honest. We're in charge, we're going to take you over, and if you don't like it, well then we'll just kill you, and we'll take your land, and we'll rape and plunder. And today we do it under the guise of democracy, as if we have democracy here in the UK. Is this democracy? If this is democracy, then democracy is a sham, and we should be ashamed for even thinking that we live in democracies, because if we do live in democracies, then we'll have to take responsibility for the actions of our representatives. So we can't have it both ways. If we live in a democracy, then the government represents our will. And if that be the case, then shame on all of us, because what the government does here is disgusting, deceptive, pathetic, and it will continue as long as we allow these crooks posing as politicians to do what they do. So Palestine. I didn't always know about Palestine. I was totally ignorant of Palestine in my 20s and before. But I realized at a certain point that there was something very special about it, and I decided at a certain point to try and understand what is happening. The more I learned about Palestine, the more I realized that the way of Palestine is the way of the world. The fate of Palestine is the fate of the world, and Palestine gets at the heart of all injustice. Every people who've ever felt the sting of injustice on a personal level, national level, racial level, religious level, whatever level, if you've ever felt injustice, then you know what it is to be a Palestinian. And if we solve the problem of Palestine, then we will solve the world's problems. That's my opinion. And to be honest, that's why I got involved with Palestine. I didn't have a personal relationship with anybody in Palestine. I simply felt that this was the place. This is where we need to focus our energy. Doesn't mean that we ignore all the other problems in the world, but we need to focus our energy on Palestine. We need to solve this problem. I was recently in Gaza for 6 months, and while I was there, I listened to people, for one. I listened to the people when I was there in 2003, 2004, and 2008 as well. And I don't hear the Palestinians saying, we want more aid. That's not what I'm hearing. In fact, billions and billions in euros and dollars is going to Palestine. And what is it doing for them? Well, it keeps them alive, I guess you could say that. If it weren't for the aid, okay, probably people would be starving to death. So if the objective is to keep people from starving to death, then fine. Let's continue to invest the majority of our energy into aid, and we'll make sure that the Palestinians don't starve to death. They'll just live in abject poverty and deal with complete denial of human rights, be treated like dogs, and live the most undignified sort of life that you can ever imagine. Because this is what we're doing, whether we know it or not. And the EU, very cleverly, plays itself as a friend of the Palestinians by giving billions in aid. There's a beautiful film that's produced by Palestinians that came out recently. It's called Donor Opium. Fantastic film. If you look it up on YouTube, I highly recommend it. It talks about the insidious nature of aid. And the way it works effectively is that these big aid agencies, and let's be clear, there's so many good people working within aid organizations. Most of the people are very, very good people. Their intentions are pure, so let us not misunderstand each other here. My love and respect goes out to those who are doing that work. And before I forget, I must say, to Brother Kadir Adnan, who's now in his 62nd day of hunger strike, I wish to express my deepest of love and respect to my brother and to the thousands of Palestinians who are rotting away in dungeons, being tortured every moment of every day. Nothing but love and respect. And I have to say, if I were Palestinian, born and bred, I have no doubt at all that I would be involved in resistance. And I certainly know that if my family were being murdered, if my brothers and sisters were being jailed, I would fight. Absolutely 100%. And I challenge those that think they're civilized in the US and Britain to imagine if the situation were reversed and it wasn't Palestine, but it was Britain or America that was invaded by a powerful nation from halfway around the world, and your people are being tortured. Your sons and daughters, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters are being imprisoned. Weapons of mass destruction and the latest military technology is employed to kill you in mass. What would we do in America, I wonder, if that was happening to us? We would fight, and it would be bloody. And the thing that's so remarkable about the Palestinians and the effectiveness of propaganda, which has gone on for decades, this incredible propaganda which has made it almost impossible to speak about the crimes of the Jewish state of Israel without being branded anti-Semitic and basically committing career suicide if you even spoke honestly about it. Never mind the fact that we can't even question one of the most important historic events in the history of our world, the Holocaust. Why is that? Why is it that we cannot even talk objectively about these issues? The reason why is because propaganda is used to confine and constrain the debate. It sets the parameters of liberal left, right wing, and you have to stay between. To go beyond is to go beyond the parameters, is to become an extremist. Well, that's exactly why we need to go beyond the parameters, because now, because people have stood up, it is possible to talk about the Jewish state of Israel and its crimes against the population that has lived there since the beginning of civilization. But it wasn't that long ago that if you did that, you would have major problems. I know from personal experience that because I have done my best with every opportunity I had to try and expose the reality of life in Gaza, that I have been subjected as well to slander, rather vicious, quite frankly, and it is amazing the level of dastardly kind of lies that can be employed against you, and yet I consider myself incredibly blessed. What I'm dealing with is nothing compared to what so many Palestinians, Iraqis, Afghanis, Pakistanis, Africans, you name it, around the world are dealing with, so I would never ask anybody to feel extra sorrow for me. However, the real point of slandering people and using lies is to try and destroy good work, because those of us who are not afraid of imprisonment or death, who speak honestly, become targets. This is a fairly understandable thing if you think about it. Those that don't seek to be in the front line or to be in a position to be really targeted may find it somewhat difficult to understand, but this is an absolute. I quote Malcolm X quite a bit when he was asked, what is the price for freedom? And his response was, the price for freedom is death. If you're not willing to pay that price, then don't use that word in your vocabulary. So Palestine, when I was in Gaza this last year, I met a lot of people, as I always do, but I met one family in particular, the Samuni family. How many people here know about the Samuni family? Can you raise your hands? Just out of curiosity, how many people in here are Palestinian? Okay. Well, the Samuni family should be known by everybody. There's a lot of reasons why you don't know about them, because it exposes everything about the incredible, sinister, evil aspects of the worst elements of Israel. During Operation Cast Lead, not so long ago, as we know, most of us, I think, 22 days of bombardment. This is an incredible act, this entire event in the first place, because in modern history, I cannot think of any other example of a place that was bombarded like this and was totally sealed off from the rest of the world. This is what makes Operation Cast Lead, in my opinion, particularly disgusting and especially shameful for all of us who didn't do enough to stop this before it even began. 1.6 million Palestinians, over 800,000 of which are children, were subjected to 22 days of the most high-tech weapons of mass destruction, including white phosphorus, depleted uranium, dime, incredibly vicious, nasty weapons. I have met a family in Gaza who had a white phosphorus bomb explode onto their home. One of their babies was turned into charcoal. It was no longer a baby. It was black. Other family members in that family died instantly, and others survived with some of the most hideous injuries that you can imagine. That's not abnormal. This has happened to quite a few people. But the Samuni family are probably the epitome of tragedy when it comes to what they dealt with. They live in an area called Zaytun. Zaytun is an agricultural area. Most of Gaza, as most people know, is very heavily populated, but this area is agricultural. The Israelis have a tendency, when they launch their incursions, to go into this area and control it. It splits the Gaza Strip in half, and it provides some strategic advantages which they seek. So they went into this area, and the Samuni family is over 250 members, and they all did what every Palestinian did the best they could to find shelter, except there was really nowhere to hide. They were then directed by the Israelis to go into one of the Samuni family homes, Wael Samuni. 97 family members went into Wael Samuni's home.